begin. Tonight we're talking about the meaning of dreams. I'd like to begin with a story. A story that happened in the 1600s. A Jew by the name of Isaac from Krakow. You know him? Isaac from Krakow had a dream one night that a treasure lay buried under the bridge in Prague. You know the famous bridge in Prague? Sandy, the Charles Bridge. Where's Sandy? You got it in your dining room, right? Underneath the Charles, every time I'm in your dining room, I think of the story. Underneath the Charles Bridge lies a buried treasure. Now, Isaac was an impoverished Jew in Krakow, Poland. He figured, no, what's there to lose? To go on a dream. He travels to Prague. Now, I don't know the distance from Krakow to Prague. It was a journey. He made the journey. He arrives in Prague only to discover that bridge is constantly manned by soldiers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Apparently, it's the bridge leading into the palace of the king of the area. Something is important going on over there. And every time that he would try to dig underneath the bridge in the spot that his dream led him to, he couldn't because there were guards all around. After a couple of days, one of the guards grew suspicious of this strange fellow who just was hanging out under the bridge in Prague. So the guard comes over to him and he says, "Tell me, sir, what are you doing here? Why are you just hanging around the bridge here in Prague?" Isaac didn't know really what to say. So he told the truth. He said, "Look, I'm a little embarrassed to tell you, but I had a dream that underneath the bridge in Prague is a buried treasure. So I'm here to see if I can succeed." The guard bursts out laughing. And he says, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Last night," he says, "I had a dream that there's a Jew in Krakow whose name is Isaac, who has a tree in his backyard, and under his tree in the backyard of his home in Krakow lies a buried treasure. Do you think I'm going to go to look for this guy in Krakow? You're out of your mind." Now, Isaac from Krakow realized that he might have just received the next clue on his treasure hunt. So he goes back home to Krakow to the tree that's in his backyard. He digs under the tree, and legend has it that he found such an extraordinary treasure. Isaac became such a rich man that until this day, 350 years later, there's a shul in Krakow called Isaac's Shul. The Chabad of Krakow is today housed in the building called Isaac's Shul in Krakow. Because he became so wealthy that what he did is that he endowed a shul. He built a shul for his community in Krakow. You look at a story like that and you wonder, interesting. Is there something to our dreams, or are they entirely babamaisis? It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our newest seminar, JEWpernatural. Here at Chabad, we love to explore every facet of our human experience, because the Torah is not only religious, it's human in every regard. Mankind has always been fascinated by that which lies beyond its reach. The meaning of dreams, the power of stars, the evil eye, curses, otherworldly spirits and angels, demons and extraterrestrials are all fascinating to the human mind. Modern science's deepening of its own understanding of the universe has only piqued our interest even further in trying to understand what it is that lies beyond. How common is the belief in the paranormal? Do you think more people believe in the paranormal or more people don't? If you look in page 2 of your textbook, you'll notice that in 3 different surveys taking place in America, Britain, and in Canada, it seems like a majority of people asked different questions seem to believe in the paranormal. Those beliefs are based on personal experiences, on intuition, on contemporary science, or maybe even on various other civilizations. But today we're gathered here to learn about what the Torah has to say. We're gathered here at Chabad for this seminar, JEWpernatural, to discover the wisdom of our own Torah. Instead of having to turn to the Far East or to look in other religions, let's learn what our own Torah has to say about the paranormal in these next 4 weeks. Today specifically, we'll be talking about what the Torah has to tell us about the meaning of our own dreams. Not only will we be learning about the paranormal, by understanding the paranormal, we'll be learning so much and shedding so much light on the normal, appreciating and understanding our role in the here and now as well, our purpose and our role on this earth. I'd like to begin our discussion today about dreams with a most disturbing dream about something quite famous. Please take a few moments in watching this very short video right here on the screen.
900 feet long, 175 feet from keel to funnel, bearing over 2,000 souls, including several of the world's wealthiest. Experts had crowned it the unsinkable, and it was making good time on its maiden voyage. One Jewish man, though, battled a feeling of unease. Isaac Frauenthal was born in Pennsylvania in October 1868, on the Jewish festival of Hoshana Rabbah, meaning Great Salvation. He opened a law practice in New York, and in March 1912, he traveled to Nice, France, to attend his brother Henry's wedding to Clara Rogers. The newlyweds journeyed on to the English port city of Southampton to ride the luxurious Titanic back to New York. And why not? A new life, a new ship, a liner predicted to live happily ever after. Isaac chose a scenic route through France, boarding the Titanic at Cherbourg the day after Passover. He paid today's equivalent of $4,000 for a first-class ticket. But he was jittery. Days earlier, he had an awful dream. He saw himself aboard a colossal steamship that crashed headlong into something large and began to sink beneath the waves. He awoke shaken, but dismissed the dream because he believed neither in dreams nor the supernatural. The night before boarding, his dream reoccurred. An oceanic collision, helplessly sinking. Escape, escape. But the sun rose, and so did he. A lot less certain than before. Was there anything to this? Should he board the Titanic? Should he share his dream? No, they would mock him. The ship was unsinkable. Isaac quietly boarded the Titan of the sea, but he later found a moment to share his fearful vision. As expected, he was roundly ridiculed. Until 4 nights later, when, at 11:40 on April 14th, the ship's lookout spotted a colossal iceberg dead ahead. The Titanic reversed its mighty engines and lurched to the left, but its starboard was lacerated. Ice tore into steel, and water dragged the ship's throat downwards. Isaac heard the captain express terror and ran to rouse Henry and Clara. Too many passengers refused to abandon ship at midnight, unable to believe that a lifeboat was safer than an Olympic liner. But Isaac had seen this vessel sink twice already. As he rolled into a lifeboat, he said, "Well, Henry, I wasn't so foolish, was I?" Henry wasn't sure. Surely such an engineering wonder could remain afloat until it could be repaired or towed. But the Titanic's stern rose into the air with hundreds clinging on. Snapping clean in two, the vessel plunged into the eternal silence of a bottomless ocean. 1,500 souls were lost. A nightmare, a reality, in the heart of the night. One sunrise and 6 hours later, Isaac was hoisted aboard the Carpathia, which sailed on to New York. He no longer doubted that something had forewarned him about the disaster. Isaac Frauenthal dismissed his disturbing dreams and sailed aboard the Titanic. If you had been in his position, would you have done the same?
Would you have boarded the ship?
Yes, we couldn't have believed it.
I told you, the Hearts actually canceled their cruise because they wanted to attend JEWpernatural. We tend to have these kind of disturbing dreams, and we're not quite sure how we are supposed to react. Now, this story of Isaac Frauenthal was documented in different books after the sinking of the Titanic.
Did you tell anybody about this before this happened?
Apparently, he told people about it on the ship, and it was documented. I mean, you can Google the story. It's covered. The question I'd like you to think about today is if you've ever had a dream that seemed very real to you, and how did you respond to it? What criteria would you engage in order to determine the authenticity of your dream? Now, I want you just to think about that. We're not going to discuss it just yet, because we're gathered here today to hear what the Torah has to say. Many of you have shared with me your dreams, your nightmares, and your extraordinary, personal, vivid experiences. But how do we separate the fact from the fiction? How do we separate the Baba Maisa from the bottom line? Is there any guidance out there that can help us along this journey that seems so very out of this world? As human beings, we have complex relationships with dreams. Many of us have had dreams that are real, which seem to be some sort of communication. Many of us have even acted upon those dreams. Yet, we still refer to them as only dreams. We refer to them as imaginary alone. Even in our expression of the English language, have you ever heard somebody being called, "You're just a dreamer," versus, "I have a dream"? How are we supposed to approach our dreams? Can we learn to interpret them? And what about nightmares? Is there anything we can do to stop them? Let's begin with what the Torah has to share with us. Now, we've prepared for you a very interesting infographic on page 6 of your textbook. A very interesting infographic which presents for you 6 of the most famous dreams of the Torah. If you've ever studied the book, read the book of Genesis, the first book of the 5 books of Moses, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, I highly encourage you to read the book of Genesis. It's a great read. Somebody was in my office today, he had read the Bible before, but he read it with our Chumash. Chumash means the Bible, 5 books of Moses. He read it with our Chumash, which has the hundreds of commentaries interpolated into the translation. So it brings the story to life instead of just being terse and incapable of understanding. The commentaries interpolated, bring the story to life, and this guy was on fire. What we've prepared for you right here on page 6 and 7 is this infographic which covers 6 of the most famous dreams of the book of Genesis. You'll notice that we have Avimelech, who was a non-Jewish king. He had a clear visitation from God telling him to be wary of hurting Sarah, the wife of Abraham. Lavan was another Gentile who had a famous dream not to hurt Jacob. Now, Jacob himself had some amazing dreams. If you remember the story of the ladder, Jacob's ladder. Joseph was known as the dreamer. He dreamed of his family bowing down to him. They thought he was nuts. Came true. Pharaoh had some incredible dreams that altered the course of human history, as well as Pharaoh's lieutenants as well. And you can take a look at them maybe a little later. The most detail, what we can learn from these dreams in Genesis, a couple messages, a couple ideas we can learn from these stories is that the most detailed description of a dream is actually Pharaoh's dream. Anybody remember Pharaoh's dream? He dreamed of 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows, and the 7 fat cows were swallowed by the 7 thin cows, and the 7 thin cows remained thin, they remained anorexic. You couldn't tell that they had swallowed the 7 fat cows. The dream was then repeated with 7 fat stalks and 7 thin stalks. Now, Pharaoh was an interesting character. He actually had dream interpreters on staff. Joel, you have any dream interpreters on staff? So Pharaoh actually had dream interpreters full time. Some people have lawyers on staff. He had dream interpreters on staff. But they failed to be able to calm his anxieties. In his gut, he felt that their interpretations were not adequate. And it was only when Joseph was pulled out of the dungeon in that extraordinary story, which I'll leave for you to read in the book of Genesis, that Joseph was able to interpret the dream of Pharaoh, a dream that was urgent, of global economical impact. We realize one thing. The first thing we learned from this story is that whilst dreams have prophetic revelation, they are not always easy to comprehend. So just because you had a dream, it doesn't mean that you understand the dream. That's the first message that we learn from the story. It's not that easy to interpret the dream. Now, a second dream that we come across is Joseph's dreams. Joseph dreamed that all of his brothers, he was one of 12 kids, all of his brothers, the 12 tribes of Israel, as well as his father and his mother, were bowing down to him. The problem with that dream was that his mother was already deceased. There was a bit of a baba maisa for his mother to be bowing down to him. Let's take a look at the message that we learn here in text number 2, page 8. This one from the Talmud, which tells us a second very important message that we learn about dreams. Rabbi Yochanan taught, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, just as there can never be wheat without chaff mixed in, so too there can never be a dream without nonsense mixed in. There's always a little baba maisa involved in every dream. Rabbi Brachia taught, even though part of a dream may be fulfilled, the entirety of the dream is never fulfilled. The source of these statements is found in the story of Joseph's dreams. Joseph's dream that the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me, referring to his parents and 11 siblings. Yet at the time of the dream, Joseph's mother was already deceased. So the second message we learn over here, in addition to the fact that dreams are not that simple to interpret, is that dreams are never entirely fulfilled. There's always a little bit of baba maisa. Now, I'm no farmer, but apparently when you harvest wheat, you got to take the wheat and you got to lift it up in the sky and you got to let the wind blow away the chaff. You know what chaff is? Chaff is the bad part of the wheat. You don't need that part. The wind blows it away, and the stuff that falls back to the ground is the good stuff. So just like wheat has chaff, so too our dreams also have a little bit of Baba Maisa involved. Now, when you read the book of Genesis, it would seem with these 6 dreams in your infographic that every dream is prophetic. But we got to put this into context, realizing that there's a confirmation bias in these 6 dreams that were placed into the book of Genesis. Because these were 6 dreams dreamed out of an entire generation of people, or multiple generations of people. There were millions of other dreams that were going on. Only these 6 were recorded in the Torah. So we can't make the mistake to think that all dreams are real dreams. We have to realize, put it into the proper context, that maybe some dreams are real, but certainly not all dreams are real. So the takeaway lessons that we can draw from here are, number 1, some dreams are meaningful. Number 2, dream interpretation, not so simple. You need an authorized dream interpreter. And number 3, dreams are never entirely accurate. This is some guidance that we gleaned from the 5 books of Moses, the written Torah. But let's take a look into the Talmud, which is the oral Torah, the explanation of the written Torah. Remember, Moses comes down from Mount Sinai 3,325 years ago and 24 days, because in 24 days' time, we'll be celebrating the festival of Shavuos, when we received the Torah in Mount Sinai. When Moses came down from the mountain, he brought with him not only the 10 commandments of sapphire, but also the 5 books of Moses inside of our holy ark. He also brought down the Talmud, which is the oral Torah explanation of the written Torah. And he also brought the secret Torah, the Kabbalah, the mysticism of Torah. So if we want to find more understanding of what God has to share with us about the meaning of dreams, we've got to look into the Talmud. The Talmud tells us the following. We find many sages of Talmud taking their dreams very, very seriously. But we need to make sure that we're looking for a general outlook and specific guidance, not for individual anecdotes. Let's see what the Talmud has to tell us in text number 3, page 10. Talmud Brachos. Brachos means blessings. Folio 57b, the Talmud says a stunning statement. A dream is 1/60th of prophecy. What does that mean? Well, we know what prophecy is. Prophecy is by divine inspiration, right? When God tells you this is what's going to happen, that's good. So what's 1/60th? The number 1 out of 60 is a very interesting number. In Jewish law, if you know about the laws of kosher, if you're cooking a delicious chicken soup on a Friday afternoon for Shabbos, and you by mistake allow a little bit of milk to fall into that chicken soup, is the chicken soup treif?
No.
Why not? It depends. Good answer.
I believe it has to be the majority.
Nope. It's not the majority. Stacy knows, Robin knows. That's right, you're close, but they're more specific. If there is less than 1 out of 60 of milk inside the meat, it's nullified. How would you know that? Well, if you have a chicken soup the size of this bima,
Yeah.
okay, and you have a drop of milk, you know that's less than 160. But if you can calculate, assuming that you can calculate that you had more than 1/60th of milk inside the chicken soup, it's all treif. Because less than 1 in 60 is canceled. 1 in 60 is valid. When we say in the Talmud that a dream is 1 out of 60, it means that it's valid. It's a tiny prophecy, but it's still a prophecy. What the Talmud is saying here is extraordinary. It means that your dreams are real. That's what it's saying. Your dreams are real. You better watch out for your dreams. That's what the Talmud is saying. It's not a full-blown prophecy. You know, in 1994, When was Hurricane Andrew? 92? 92. Hurricane Andrew, 1992. Do you remember anybody who was in Florida at that time? In Miami Beach? You were there, Tom? Photographer, thank you. So 1992, they forced evacuated Miami Beach because the hurricane was a category 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and it was heading straight to Miami Beach. So everybody was sent out. The Rabbi, who had already had a stroke in New York, was asked if the Jews of Miami Beach should evacuate. And the Rabbi, who couldn't talk, he went like this. Now people's lives are in danger. So Hannah's grandfather, the Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Krinsky, asked the Rebbe, does that mean that the Jews of Miami Beach should stay? So they shouldn't leave. This is all documented on video. Now we know what happened. The police came to Miami Beach and they made the crazy Chabadniks sign affidavits that they were putting their lives in their own hands by staying in Miami Beach. And we know what happened at the very last moment. The hurricane shifted south. It went to Homestead, where everybody had evacuated. Now that's more prophetic. You know, the holy person who has a prophecy, he's able to tell you, when the Rebbe was able to tell people at the beginning of the Gulf War, and this again is on video, 1991, go to Israel. Israel's the safest place in the world. You have nothing to be afraid of. A delegation from Sydney, Australia was doing a mission to Israel. They wanted to cancel. The Rebbe said, I don't understand why you want to cancel. Israel's the safest place in the world. It's all on video. That is prophecy. But when you and I have a regular dream, the Talmud says that's 1/60th of prophecy. It's a baby prophecy, but it's a prophecy nonetheless. It's not canceled out. That's a big statement that the Talmud's making over here. The Talmud goes so far as to tell us about specific images in your dreams that portend specific messages. Now, we've taken the liberty here on page 11, 12, and 13 to present for you an infographic of multiple kinds of images that you might see in your dreams and what they mean. So you want to print this out and put it on next to your bed. So if you dream of a hen, you'll know that it's a beautiful garden and reason to rejoice. The dream of a camel, however, you've been saved from the decree of death. Here it is on page 11, 12, and 13. This is a pretty cool chart here to give you guidance to your next dream. So when you wake up next time, you want to make sure that you got this chart handy so you can remember. Clearly, the Talmud is going to great length. The Talmud, all these, by the way, are sourced inside of the Talmud, Tractate Brachot, folios 55 through 58b, which go to great detail to tell us exactly what the meaning of our dreams are. Straight from the Talmud, folio 58b. It's listed at the beginning of page 11. It's straight from the Talmud Brachot. Now, to give us an example of how seriously our sages took their dream, take a look at text number 4, page 14. Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Ravidi, visited the home of Rav Ashi. His host prepared a choice delicacy, a third-born calf, and offered it to him to eat. Rav Ashi says, I'm sorry, I can't eat. I'm observing a fast. They countered, do you not agree with the ruling of your Yehuda that a person may break a self-imposed fast and repay his obligation by fasting on a different day? No, so you're fasting so you can change your fast, so what? Says Rav Ashi, no. This is a fast due to a bad dream. Rav Bar Machasya taught in the name of Rav Chama Bar Guria, who taught in the name of Rav that a fast nullifies the portents of a bad dream like fire consumes flax. Interesting. And Rav Chisda stipulated that the fast is most effective when observed on the day of the dream. You wake up, you fast right away. I can't push this fast off. I don't care what you're serving, which foie gras you're serving. Yet Rav Yosef added that such a fast may even be observed on Shabbos. You know what Shabbos is? Shabbos, you're not allowed to fast. Shabbos is a day of rest, a day of joy, a day of peace and relaxation. You're never, ever allowed to fast except one exception. It's true. He's right. Yom Kippur. 2 exceptions. Thank you, Mark. Yom Kippur, you're allowed to fast on Shabbos, but another reason you're allowed to fast on Yom Kippur on Shabbos is for a fast. It's for a bad dream. I'm sorry. Clearly, the dream is so serious that the sages were willing to mitigate their joy of Shabbos in order to fast. It's actually quite encouraging to know that as bad as the bad dream might be, as bad as the nightmare might be, the fast can abort the portents of the bad dream. And that's thankfully quite encouraging. When it comes to the power of this fast, I want you to know that we actually have tremendous power over our dreams. We are able to mitigate the negativity of our dreams. Take a look on page 15, text number 5. We're not subject to the negativity of our dreams. Text number 5, a person who has a bad dream should not say, the decree has already been sealed and all hope is lost. The possibility of rectification through repentance and supplication is always available, even for the worst nightmare possible. This person should fast, repent, and pray for mercy. If one does so, God will accept the fast, repentance, and prayer, and he will cancel all negative decrees that were issued. The negative events portended by the dream will be revoked swiftly like fire consumes flax. They will be revoked completely just as fire consumes flax, completely without leaving any remnants, unlike wood, which does leave some charcoal after being burned. What we learn from this piece is that bad dreams are bad. Dreams are real, but we are able to fix them in 2 ways. Number 1, speed. The decree will be revoked as swiftly as fire consumes flax. And number 2, entirety. That just like the fire consumes all of the flax, so too the fast will abolish the entirety of the bad dream. One day. Yeah, that same day. So this is a very powerful message we extract right over here. And that is that the Torah teaches us that no law, no fate is ever set in stone. Everything can be changed by soliciting divine intervention. We are never a slave to our destiny or our fate. Yes. We'll find out in a moment. So far, it seems from the Talmud that we should take our dreams very seriously. But even if you do have a really bad nightmare, don't despair. There's remedies available. So far. Now I'm going to take you to a different teaching in the Talmud, which brings us a completely opposite approach. The next piece of Talmud is going to teach us that the dreams that we dream at night are a product of the thoughts that we think by day. I'm going to share with you now 2 extraordinary stories of 2 anti-Semites who tried to manipulate their Jewish subjects, but the wisdom of their Jewish subjects prevailed. Take a look. Text number 6, page 17. This again is straight from the Talmud. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani taught in the name of Rabbi Yonatan, people are only shown in their dreams the products of their own daytime thoughts. The Roman emperor once said to Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Rabbi Hanania, you Jews claim to be very wise. Tell me then, what will I see in my dream tonight? Can you imagine an anti-Semite asks you this question? You guys are so smart. Okay, what am I going to dream about tonight? Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania was ready for the challenge. He said, you will see the Persians, your mortal enemy, capture and enslave you, and they will force you to herd pigs with a staff of gold. The emperor thought about this vision all day, and guess what happened? He had painted such a vivid picture of his worst nightmare, complete with a golden staff herding the pigs, that at night he saw it in his dream. And again, King Shapur, who was the king of Persia, once said to Shmuel, who lived in Babylon, you Jews claim to be very wise. It was an interesting story. The corollary happening in Persia. Tell me then, what will I see in my dream tonight? Shmuel replied, you will see the Romans take you captive and force you to grind date pits with a golden mill. The king thought about this vision all day. He was haunted. And at night, he saw it in his dream. So what the Talmud is telling us here is that dreams are merely the product of our daytime thoughts. Whatever you think about in the daytime is what you're going to think about at nighttime. Not only does this apply to dreams in the future, but even dreams about the past, even about a fait accompli. Take a look at this. There's an interesting law in Torah. You know, your money is not entirely yours. You know that? That's an interesting concept to discuss. Money comes from where? Not from First Republic Bank or from what's the other one in Silicon Valley? I forget what it's called. Signature. Is that what's called? Signature? Money actually comes from God Almighty. Now, God makes a deal with us. He says, listen, I'm your partner. I want my share. What's my share, says God, you know? Not taxes. That's the government's share. Tzedakah, but how much tzedakah do you need to give? 10%. There you go, 10%, a tithe. This is not an invention of the Christians, by the way. They got it from us. It comes from the Torah, okay? Just FYI. The tithe, God says, it's interesting, the word for tithe in Hebrew is the same word as wealthy in Hebrew. Aser is a tithe. Ashir is wealthy. Because God says to you, if you can give a tithe, which is not easy, you made $100 to give away $10. If you can give a tithe, I promise you, says God, I will make you wealthy. Just very interesting. So there's more than one tithe that you have to give to charity. There's actually two tithes. And the way it works, without getting too technical, is that the first tithe you're supposed to give to the poor. The second tithe you have to give to the Levites. Anybody here a Levite? Put your hand up if you're a Levite. You guys get supported by the rest of us. You don't have to work. So certain years you give the second tithe to the Levites, and certain years of a 7-year cycle, you give the second tithe. It's called Meiser Sheni, the tithe of Jerusalem. This is very interesting. Sandy, you just came back from Israel, right? The second tithe is a tithe that you have, let's say you have a field, you grew your figs, right? So your first 10% of your figs you give to the poor. Nice. The second 10% of your figs, you got to sell, save that money, and that money now you got to take to Jerusalem, where you have to eat that money in Jerusalem. So you buy food in Jerusalem and you have to eat it in Jerusalem. This is basically an economic engine to boost the people's connection to Jerusalem. Because imagine what happens when Jews never go to Israel. Lauren, you just came back from Poland, from the Watch of the Living, right? You feel so connected to the Holocaust. Imagine if somebody never went to Poland, never went to Jerusalem. You'd feel a little disconnected. 3 times a year, we're commanded to go to Jerusalem in the pilgrimage festivals. This second tithe you're supposed to eat in Jerusalem. So here, now that we understand that money is sacred money, your second tithe, you sold the figs. The money is sitting in a special bank account. That's a holy bank account, which you have to take that money with you to Jerusalem to spend in Jerusalem. Now, with that introduction, let's take a look at this next dream on page 19, text number 7. A person was troubled about the whereabouts of money that his deceased father had left him. He dreamed that his father told him exactly how much money it was, and in the dream where it could be found. But in the dream, the father who told him how much money and where it was, he said that money was consecrated as the second tithe. He went to that specific place, and guess what happened? And indeed, he found that exact amount of money in that exact place. Now, one would think, therefore, he found the amount of money in the right place, right? Therefore, the money is consecrated, right? No. The sages instructed this person that the contents of the dream are irrelevant, and he need not treat the money as Meiser Sheni, as the sanctified tithe. What this Talmud is effectively telling us is that our dreams have no practical implication, no legal implication. We don't need to sanctify those funds. It sounds counterintuitive. I mean, you found the money in the right place, the right amount. So why is it not considered holy money? It's not holy money, says the Talmud. You can do with it whatever you want. Buy yourself an iPod, whatever you want. How do we reconcile these two conflicting Talmudic views? On the one hand, we shared some views that showed us that the sages took their dreams so seriously that they fasted 1/60th of prophecy. On the flip side, we find that dreams are only the product of our conscious minds. The funds are not consecrated. The key to solving this enigma lies in the Talmudic piece, which reconciles two conflicting Torah verses. One verse that says the dreams are real, one verse that says the dreams are not. Now we're going to settle this debate once and for all. You ready? Text number 8, page 20. Here it is. The Talmud tells us that Rabbi raised the contradiction between two verses in the written Torah. In one verse, God says, I speak with a prophet in a dream. Dreams are real. But a second verse states in Zechariah, dreams speak falsely. Which one is it? The Talmud resolves this. There are two types of dreams. Some come by the means of an angel, and some come by the means of a demon. Ooh. Now, allow me to say that this is lesson 1 of the series. Lesson 4 will be focusing on angels and demons. That's going to be very interesting. And other extraterrestrial beings. But suffice it to say for today, that generally, angels are disembodied souls. They're spiritual beings that don't have a physical body.
But you mean that they were once living people?
No.
No.
Human beings are souls that were created inside of bodies. Angels never had a body in the first place. They are spiritual beings that were created to remain exclusively spiritual. We'll be elaborating more about them in lesson 4. But to elaborate for right now, let's take a look at text number 9 in the words of the previous Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, page 21. He explains it as follows. At a certain time during sleep, souls rise up to the heavenly academy, each soul going to the hall it is associated with. Sleep is not just Control-Alt-Delete. Sleep is actually accessing a spiritual world. In general terms, the location in the heavenly place where a person's soul rests at night is commensurate with the spiritual stature that they've achieved with their daytime divine service. So if you're a low spiritual, if you're of low consciousness in the daytime, then at nighttime you experience the basement. But if you're of higher consciousness, then at nighttime you go up to the penthouse. More specifically, if a person observed the mitzvah, studied Torah, or prayed in a more beautiful and complete manner that day, or went to sleep with words of Torah or thoughts of Torah in their mind, then they merit a loftier location in heaven. The heavenly palace contains hallways, colonnades, lounges, and halls in which the soul can rest when it rises to heaven to draw new life during sleep. Let me just explain this point. When we go to sleep, our souls are untethered. Our body remains on life support down here, allowing the soul to rise up to heaven. You know, the Talmud tells us that sleep is 1/60th of death. Now, you appreciate what 1/60th means. A little bit, but a significant little bit. Sleep is 1/60th of death. What does that mean? It means that just like death is when the soul goes home, when we sleep, our soul goes upstairs. Much like when at night, you take your cell phone, which is on 3%, you plug it into the wall, and you leave it there. So in the morning, when you wake up, it's 100%, right? The soul plugs into its power source at night. It leaves the body, which is why the body remains unconscious, where the soul rises upstairs. It doesn't just go nowhere, it goes home. There, when it goes home to the heavenly academy, which we just described in text number 9, the soul is greeted by various angels. Those spiritual beings that greet the soul along the way might inform the soul of upcoming events. Oh, you're here. Do you know who's coming to you next week? Do you know the ship you're sailing on tomorrow is going to hit an iceberg? Those angels up in heaven, and again, it's going to be a beautiful discussion in lesson 4. But those souls are spiritual beings with spiritual consciousness. They may or may not inform the soul of various truths, realities that surround that soul. The Zohar makes it explicitly clear. The Zohar is the foundational text of the Kabbalah of the secret Torah. Take a look, page 22, text number 10. While a person sleeps, the soul rises to the level of the holy angels and receives certain information, learns new things, and then returns to its place. This is the experience of connection to holiness. This is straight from the Kabbalah core, this quote over here about what happens when we sleep. Now, when we sleep, the dreams that originate with the angels are real. But the dreams that originate with the demons are not real. What exactly are demons? Now, again, we'll talk about that in lesson 4. But today, for the purposes of today's discussion, I'm going to share with you that the demons are our own imaginations. Take a look at this on page 23, text number 11. False dreams are a product of an unhealthy, possessed imagination, right? The sages borrowed the term demon to describe this negative, destructive spirit that afflicts a person. Dreams from this source are meaningless, and one shouldn't be concerned with them at all. So when we say that a dream originates with an angel, we mean that when we sleep, like death, 1/60th of death, our soul rises up to heaven and has a chat with a conversation in the heavenly hallways. But when we say that a dream originates with a demon, what we mean to say is that it is the product of our own overenthusiastic imagination, our own overenthusiastic daytime thoughts. Let me explain how this works. You know, every word that you speak in your state of being awake is an expression of your soul. Not only every word, but every thought that you think is an expression of your eternal soul. When you sleep, your soul, like a hot air balloon, wants to rise up to its source, to plug in to the cell phone charger, to recharge. You go to sleep exhausted, you wake up refreshed. The soul wants to go upstairs, but guess what happens? Why doesn't a hot air balloon rise? Too many sandbags. Your soul too has too much babamaisis, nonsense words that you spoke and thoughts that you thought in the daytime that are bogging it down. Our sages tell us that there's an angel called Malach HaMemun Alach Halaymas, the angel in charge of dreams, whose job it is to divest the sandbags off of the hot air balloon, to throw off the nonsensical words and thoughts that were spoken and thoughts during the daytime that act like sandbags holding down the hot air balloon to allow the soul to rise. Now, what happens with those words, with those letters that were left behind when the soul rises up? They become a nonsensical weaving of ideas that we dream about at night. What we dream about at night is a weird combination of the thoughts that we thought about it of the daytime, because in order to allow our soul to rise up to heaven, the Baba Maisas we thought and spoke are left behind. They're dumped back in the unconscious mind of the sleeping person. So if you imagine your mother-in-law surfing a wave in Jeffreys Bay in South Africa, it's probably because you were thinking about your mother-in-law, and you also were thinking about taking a vacation, and your second cousin twice removed was going surfing somewhere. So it kind of all gets mixed up together, mumble jumble. This is what's called a dream that's the product of a demon. What it means is it's the product of a Baba Maisa. It's the product of your random imagination. Turns out, therefore, that angels are positive spiritual forces. They occupy the heavenly realm, which is where our souls go when they sleep, and they are able to communicate divine information to us. But demons, who are generally known as impure spiritual beings, in the context of dreams, are a metaphor for the products of our own mind, what we're going to call the imagination. Therefore, when it comes to our dreams and resolving the conflict between the Talmud's authenticity of dreams versus the ignoring of dreams, it depends. Those dreams that are the product of our imagination are nonsense, and those dreams that are the product of angels are miniature forms of prophecy. Let's dig a little bit deeper in order to see how this works at a practical level. Warren. I imagine that when you sleep, your soul goes up at night. Yeah. Yeah, if you're nocturnal, then I imagine it happens by daytime. Yeah. Now, I'm going to share with you an extraordinary story, Allison. Sounds like a demon to me. I got 3 babies at home. I'm surviving on 0 sleep. I don't feel bad for you. Yeah, our third youngest just turned 2, so it's pretty intense in my home front. But I would imagine that when you're sleeping that little, so what is your question? If you're not receiving anything, I would imagine that you're surviving on survival mode, right? Which means you're getting an hour here, 20 minutes there, like me. Right? So there's something called REM sleep. In the olden days, you remember those days when you could sleep until you were finished sleeping? Sometimes my wife and I go on a holiday and we say, Hannah, tonight we don't have to set the alarm clock because tonight we can sleep until we're done. Whoever thought of such a thing? But when you have babies all over the place, it's beautiful. But yeah, I think that the deepest sleep happens during REM sleep, rapid eye movement. And maybe us young parents don't really get to experience that so much. So hold on tight. It's going to come. Okay. I was trying to keep on moving, guys, because there's some very exciting material I want to share with you. So there's a beautiful story I want to share with you in the Talmud, which is going to shed extraordinary light on how we are supposed to deal with that dream. So far, we know that we have 2 kinds of dreams. Some dreams are very, very real, and some dreams are just total Baba Maisa nonsense. This story is going to change the whole conversation. The Talmud tells us a story of 2 great Talmudic sages by the name of Abaye and Rava. They lived 2,000 years ago, no, a little less, 1,800 years ago in Babylon. Both Abaye and Rava, who were colleagues in the Torah study, dreamed the same dream multiple times. I think it was 24 dreams that they dreamed the same on the same night. So what did they do? They both went. No, they didn't know about the other. They both went to the same dream interpreter. I don't know about any dream interpreters in Palm Beach Gardens, but they went to the same dream interpreter. You can come to me. After the story, you'll understand why you should come to me. You'll see why. You better not go anywhere else. So they both went to the same dream interpreter. His name was Bar Hedya, the son of Hedya. Now, Bar Hedya was not the most scrupulous person because Abaye paid him for his services in advance. Rava didn't pay him for his services in advance. So here's what the Talmud tells us. They both had the same dreams repeatedly. They both went the same night, the same morning to the same dream interpretation. To the one who paid him in advance, he gave a good report to Abaye. And to the one, that's why you have to tip. And the one who gave him the one who didn't pay him, to Rava, he gave a bad interpretation. They dreamt, for example, that an ox was slaughtered before their eyes. So to Rava, who did not pay him in advance, he said, your business will fail and you will be so miserable that you will have no appetite. Abaye, who paid him, he said, your business will flourish to the point that you'll have no appetite. You'll be so rich, you'll have no appetite. And both of them came true. Rava lost his money. Abaye got his money. The next dream, I'll give you 4 examples. The next dream was lettuce on a keg. You ever dreamt about a lettuce on a keg? To Abaye, who paid him, he said, like a lettuce has double leaves, like it's folded over, you'll experience double prosperity. To Rava, who didn't pay him in advance, he said, like a lettuce, your success will be bitter. Third dream, a barrel on a palm tree. What does that even look like, a barrel on a palm tree? That's what they dreamed. To Abaye, who paid him, he said, you will have high value. And to Rava, your wine will be of high value, elevated. To Rava, who didn't pay him, he said, the barrel on the palm tree represents that your wine will be sweet and spoiled. Finally, the 4th example of many, many examples in the Talmud. The 4th example is a pomegranate growing out of a keg. Abaye, who paid him, he said, your success will be expensive like a pomegranate. To Rava, who didn't pay him, he said, your success will be tart like a pomegranate. The results, the Talmud says, were for both of them exactly as predicted by the dream interpreter. This one prospered and this one failed. To the point that while Abaye prospered, Rava lost his wife. This was the product of a dream of his house door falling off. He says, your wife is going to die. Your sons and daughters will die. That was when he dreamed that his teeth were falling out and that he would get a double beating. That's when he dreamed about the 2 heads of a turnip in a dream. So Rava had the raw end of the stick. He didn't pay him. Abaye got the very positive interpretation. They all came true, both as predicted. At the end, Rava eventually, I guess he got some guilt and he decided to pay him. So when Rava eventually paid Bar Hedya interpreted his next dream as that he was going to have a miracle happen to him. That was the next interpretation for Rava, who got all the bad stuff so far. I don't know if you want to pay a dream interpreter like that, but he paid him. So he said to him that you're gonna have a dream, you're gonna have a miracle happen to you. A couple of days later, Rava gets onto a boat. And who's on that boat already before he gets there? The dream interpreter Bar Hedya. So Bar Hedya says, I'm out of here. You are about to have a miracle happen to you. I am not sticking around where you are about to have a miracle. So he jumps off the boat. As he jumps off the boat, the Talmud says he drops a book. A book falls out of his coat. Rava opens the book and he sees the following 4 words written on the book. These are very powerful words. Hachaloimos hoilchin achar hapeh. That dreams follow the interpretation of the mouth. Those were the 4 words that he saw in this book. And Rava dawned upon him right now at this moment that exactly the way that the dream is verbally interpreted is how it will be fulfilled. And now he realized that Abaye, who had the same dream, had positive interpretations and he had negative interpretations. He realized what a scoundrel he was dealing with. Now, Rava was not a guy that you want to mess with, as you'll see, because Rava got really upset. He lost his wife, his kids, and his wealth. So Rava then realized what had happened. He cursed him. He cursed this guy Bar Hedya that he was going to die a miserable death. the Talmud gets into a very graphic story about how this guy was actually tied by the Romans between two palm trees, and they allowed his body to, it was awful, an awful death. But from here in this Talmud, we learn this extraordinary wisdom that the dream's fulfillment follows the interpretation of the mouth. What this means is that whether your dream will be good or bad depends on how it's verbalized in this world. This idea is a secret that was passed on in the Talmud. The Talmud tells us that Rabbi Birayim passed it to Rabbi Nachum, who passed it to Rav Panda, who passed it to Rabbi Akiva, on to Rav Zavda, and ultimately to Rav Bizna. This wisdom that your dream depends, the dream's fulfillment depends on how it is verbally interpreted. When these sages went to the 24 dream interpreters in Jerusalem, all 24 interpretations came true, because each one of them was verbalized. This principle is based on the Torah's account of Joseph's interpreting of Pharaoh's dream. Remember Pharaoh's dream, the 7 cows and the fat cows, thin cows, 7 stalks, thin stalks, fat stalks? The Torah tells us these following words. Vayihi ka'asher pasar lehen Yosef kein haya. And it was, as Joseph verbalized their interpretation, so it was fulfilled. The Kabbalah derives from this verse that this is all based upon the power of human beings and our speech. Do you remember how God created this world? How did God create the world? Ask Michelangelo. He'll tell you that God touched something. Remember the Sistine Chapel? Baba Mises. The Torah tells us that God created the world through speaking. Now we human beings are created in the image of God. Just like God creates the world through speech, we too create our reality through our words. Our words become our reality. In the Kabbalah, the human being is defined as medaber, as speaker. We have to be so careful of the words that come out of our mouths, because we, like our Creator, create through our speech. The way you choose to interpret your dream is the way it will be fulfilled. So when you do have a bad dream, who are you going to talk to? Are you going to talk to your sister-in-law, who's the ultimate pessimist? Are you going to talk to your rabbi, who's the ultimate optimist? You've got to be very, very careful who you share this wisdom with, this dream with, because how it will manifest in this world depends on how it is verbalized by the person that you're talking to. We have a heckler. Okay. The Torah goes on to say that it's not just okay for the dream interpreter to just throw out any random interpretation of a dream. The Torah says that when Joseph interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh, it says, the interpretations of the dreams of the butler and the baker. You remember that story, the butler and the baker of Pharaoh? He didn't just throw random interpretations. Ish kachaleimai pasar, the interpretation was very similar to the metaphor of the dream. You can't just make up an interpretation. It's got to be consistent with the flow of the dream. And this is all connected to the power of our words. I want to share with you a little insight into the extraordinary power of our words. This example might be a little macabre, so bear with me. There's a law in Torah that if you marry a woman who's a virgin, there's a certain amount that you have to pay for her ketubah. Ketubah is her marital dowry, right? But if the person's not if the woman's not a virgin, then you pay less, right? 100 or 200 zuz. It's just the law in Torah. Now, if a young girl, loses her hymen, her virginity, before the age of 3 years old, it will grow back. The Talmudic principle. It will grow back. But if she loses it after the age of 3 years old, it will not grow back. This is Talmud. Torah tells us this, right? If a girl who's almost 3 years old loses her virginity, and then the sages declare a leap year, which means that her losing her virginity will have been post-dated to before her 3rd birthday, then that declaration of the leap year will retroactively allow her hymen to grow back. I mean, this is a pretty awesome concept that the Talmud gets into, because it sounds out of this world. But I share it with you because how we rule as a court, as human beings, how we determine the calendar changes the physical reality of this world. This, my friends, is the idea of what Torah tells us with regards to our dreams. Our dreams are real. Our dreams are only real if they're not connected to the thoughts that you thought about all day long. I want you to think about your most recent nightmare. Was that nightmare, just think about this, was that nightmare connected to something you were thinking about that day? If it was, it's a Baba Maisa. Recently, in around that time. But if you had a dream about someone that you haven't dreamed about and you haven't thought about in 30 years, do you remember Golda? Golda from Tevye, Vigler on the roof. Do you remember the dream? He wanted her to marry the daughter. He wanted her to marry who? Yente wanted her to marry she got betrothed to the butcher. Golda wanted her to marry the butcher. But remember, Muttel, the tailor, he asked for her hand in marriage, right? So Tevye came up with that whole dream. Remember that story? Tevye, if my baby, I forget her name, if she came from the other world to say that Yenta has to marry, what was it? From a Sarah, that's what it was. If from a Sarah came from the other world to say that Yenta has to marry Muttel, then so be it, she's going to marry Muttel. And she did, right? And they lived happily ever after, right? Such is a dream which is real. Now, obviously, we know the story. It's Baba Maisa's story, but that's besides the story. When it comes to a dream that you haven't thought about in many years, you haven't thought about from a Sarah, that's a real dream. But if it's a dream that you were thinking about recently, then it's just the product of demons. It's just the product of something which you've been thinking about recently, and that's just a total Baba Maisa. Yes, Karen.
My question is, if you have a dream that you don't, it's not the day.
What's that? I'll tell you.
If you know sure now and do not discuss it and do not tell anyone.
Okay, so the question Karen's asking is, what happens if you choose not to verbalize your dream in any way whatsoever? The Talmud says about your question that a dream that is uninterpreted is like a letter that is unread.
That's what you want.
That's what the Talmud says. In other words, you've not verbalized the dream. Shvaig. You know what shvaig means? Silence. Be careful with your mouth. Your mouth is a very powerful tool that manifests reality into this physical realm. As long as it hasn't been verbalized, you don't have to say everything that you're thinking. You got to filter before you speak, and certain things need not to be verbalized, because once you verbalize, you've brought them into the realm of this physical world, and that's when it manifests. Beautiful question. Now, what happens if you had a dream and it still bothers you? Still bothers you. What are you going to do? You're still perturbed. There's a very practical solution. Now, if you know, in our prayer books, during the high holidays, we have the priestly blessing. That's when the priests get up on the bima and they go like this. Have you ever seen this? When the priests, the Kohanim, get on the bima, they go like this, and they under their talis and they go, and they give us the priestly blessing, right? I remember I was back in South Africa. I was a little kid. I must have been 5 or 6 years old. It was a Yontiv when middle of the week, when I guess the Coca-Cola delivery guy to the shul didn't get the memo that it was Yontif. So he walks in and I'm standing under my father's talus and I'm watching what's happening. And I see this Coca-Cola guy, he's like whistling on his Walkman. Remember the Walkmans? He had a Walkman and he was pushing his stroller. And he comes into the synagogue and he sees a sea of people swaying under their blankets. I just remember him saying, "Oh, expletive." And he was out of that door in no time at all. So whilst we do the priestly blessing, there's a very beautiful prayer that we actually recite in order to sweeten our dreams. I'd like you to take a look at it. Text 14, it's on page 29. This is actually printed inside of our prayer books. And I want to highly encourage you to adopt this prayer. For any dreams that perturb you, remember the power of speech. What we're doing now is we're verbalizing a positive spin to our perturbing dreams. Take a look. This is straight from the Talmud, text 14. Master of the universe, I'm yours, and my dreams are yours. I've dreamed a dream, and I do not know what it is. May it be, O will, my God, and the God of my fathers, that all my dreams concerning myself or concerning any other Jew shall be for the good. Verbalized. Whether dreams are dreamed about others, or whether about myself, whether others dreamed about me. If they are good dreams, strengthen them and reinforce them, and may they be fulfilled in me and in them, like the dreams of Joseph. But if they require a remedy, heal them like Chezkiyahu, the king of Judah, from his illness, like Miriam, the prophetess, from her leprosy, like Naaman from his leprosy, like the waters of Marah by Moses, and like the waters of Jericho by Elisha. As you change the curse of the wicked Bilam from a curse into a blessing, so shall you change all my dreams concerning myself and concerning all of Israel to good. Guard me, be gracious to me, and favor me. Okay, so what are we saying here? This prayer we're supposed to say every time that the priests get up there for the priestly blessing. We want to time the conclusion of our blessing with the conclusion of the priestly blessing, so that when the congregation answers Amen, they're saying Amen, validating not only the priestly blessing, but also my personal prayer. And if you've had a bad dream, you can do this any day, this prayer. You come to shul, and you have in mind that when the chazan, the leader, repeats the Amidah, when he does the repetition of the Amidah and the congregation answers Amen, in the Sim Shalom prayer at the end of the Amidah, you time it in a way that you read this prayer to coincide with the conclusion of your prayer, with the conclusion of Sim Shalom. So when the congregation answers Amen, they're answering Amen to your prayer as well. It's interesting. I want to show you a quick case study of how the Rebbe interpreted someone's dream. There was a person who was bothered by his dream. He asked his question in English. He was suffering from dreams for years, and he failed to find a proper dream interpreter according to his question. He asked for general guidance on how to discern regular dreams from those divinely inspired. But then he asked a specific question about a dream that he had. In his dream, he was angry at the injustice in the world. And he said to himself in the dream that, considering the current state of affairs, he needs to ascend from here. That was the question. That was the dream. And he asked the Rebbe, what does this dream mean? Take a look at text 15 on page 32. Take a look at how the Rebbe responds to his dream. As a general rule, there is no need for instructions to be communicated through dreams. For instruction, God gave each and every one of us the Torah of truth and life, which illuminates a Jew's path in life. In other words, you want guidance, you get it from the Torah. But when one isn't observing God's instruction given in the Torah, one may sometimes receive a hint regarding this in a dream or the like. So dreams are real. And now the Rebbe interprets his dream. It is certain that the message of your dream is not about injustices in the world in the literal sense, for such issues are completely beyond your ability to rectify. Rather, the straightforward meaning of your dream is clear. This is the Rebbe's positive interpretation. You are being shown that you need to be angry about the fact that your world Your personal life that you exercise full control over is being conducted unjustly, contrary to divine justice. You personally are not the way you should be. You must ascend from this mode of conduct through actual day-to-day behavior in accordance with God's instructions as stated in the Code of Jerusalem. What the Rebbe was doing was interpreting his dream in a positive way, being careful not to say to him that there's going to be some asteroid attack on your home, that there's going to be some war breaking out in your neighborhood. The Rebbe was saying this means a spiritual message that you need to be improving your spiritual service. So when your friend tells you, when your spouse or children tell you about their bad dreams, you have to be extremely cautious about the words that come out of your mouth, because your mouth is powerful. The dreams follow the interpretation of the mouth. You have to be careful not to say anything negative, because anytime that you say something negative, you are creating a reality. Friends, be careful of four-letter words. You think that they're just speech, but they're not. Your words are powerful, especially words relating to the power of dreams. Because when you verbalize that dream, give it a positive spin that relates to the general context of that dream, so that you will be giving a positive manifestation to that dream and not, God forbid, the opposite. So are we able to do anything to proactively preempt any nightmares? The Rebbe gives us guidance here as well. The Rebbe says that if you want to change, if you want to reduce your nightmares, here's what you can do. If you want to avoid having nightmares, then what you need to do, number one, is control your thoughts in the daytime. Don't think about all the worst case scenarios. Don't envision another Holocaust, right? Don't envision all the terrible things that could possibly happen. Think good thoughts. Keep it positive. Remember the Rebbe, if you've ever seen a video of the Rebbe's Farbrengens, the Rebbe's full of joy, full of positivity, upbeat and happy. There's no place for darkness. Number one, control your thoughts. Think good stuff. That's the first thing. The second thing is that before we go to sleep at night, there's a biblical obligation to recite the bedtime Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, right? You're supposed to say that every morning when you wake up and every night before you go to sleep. We have a gift for you here today before you leave. It is a special Shema card in Hebrew and in English for you to put on your nightstand before you go to sleep. You read the Shema and a very special blessing about restoring your soul to heaven and preempting negative nightmares. You read this at night, the Rebbe says, you will be preempting any negative dreams. And finally, make sure that God is standing guard at your front door by having a kosher mezuzah, not something that looks like a mezuzah, not something that smells like a mezuzah, not something that was once upon a time next to a kosher mezuzah, but a kosher mezuzah, a mezuzah that actually is kosher, bought from a God-fearing kosher scribe, to make sure that you have God's divine protection on your home. I'm going to conclude right now with wrapping it all up together. Here's what I'm going to say. In closing, there are three different kinds of dreams. The first kind of dreams is what I'm going to call the Baba Maisa dream. It's the dream that the angel in charge of the hot air balloon has to throw off the sandbags. It's all the narishkeit. You know what narishkeit means? Nonsense. It's a fancy Yiddish word. Use that word, you'll sound very educated. Narishkeit is just nonsense. Just Baba Maisa, all the stuff you were talking about in the daytime. It's just all mishkabubbled all together when your soul rises up to heaven. That's nonsense. If your dream at night is something which relates to something you've been thinking about recently, let it go. Nothing. Then there's a level 2 kind of dream. This is an ambiguous dream. The dream that wasn't really connected to a dream that you've been dreaming recently, to a thought that you've been thinking recently, or a word that you've said recently. Such a dream is subject to the interpretation of your mouth. Be very careful what you say when you hear that dream. And be careful who you share that dream with. Only with an optimist, super optimist. No room for negativity. But then there's the third kind of dream, which is the unmistakably prophetic dream. You know, in the 13th century, there was a great sage in Germany called the Maharam Rothenburg. He was trying to emigrate out of Germany. But the German king, the Prussian king, didn't want him to leave, because if he would leave, all the Jews would leave, less taxes. So he imprisoned the rabbi. And for the last 14 years of his life, the rabbi was in a German prison. The rabbi refused to allow anyone to ransom him because he didn't want to embolden the efforts of the anti-Semites. Because if the anti-Semites would see they made so much money from imprisoning a rabbi, then they would do it again. So he said, nobody should pay for my ransom. The rabbi Maharam Rothenburg, he died in prison the last 14 years of his life. After he died, nobody wanted to ransom his body. The German king refused to allow his body to be released. He wanted the Jews to ransom his body. I think it was 14 years, maybe 7 years, that nobody ransomed his body because they were afraid, because the rabbi said nobody should ransom his body. One day, a certain individual in the community of Rothenburg paid the money and he ransomed his body. The next day, that guy died. Everybody thought he must have done a terrible sin. That guy who died came the next day to the rabbi of the town. And he told the rabbi of the town that the night after he had ransomed the body of the Maharam Rothenburg, the Maharam had come to him in a dream. And the Maharam said, thank you for redeeming my body. I want to offer you one of two rewards. Either you and your children until the coming of the Messiah will be wealthy, or you will share my portion in the world to come in heaven. If you take the latter, it's got to be now. What do you want to do? And the guy who ransomed him, he said, I chose the latter, and that's the reason why I died the next day. Such dreams are of prophetic nature, right? There's no doubt in your mind that these are real dreams. There's the various kinds of dreams that the Talmud tells us are beyond any shadow of a doubt real dreams. For example, the Talmud tells us that a dream that a friend dreamt about you. If your friend comes over to you and tells you a dream that they dreamt about you, there's something there. A dream which includes its own interpretation, like the butler and the baker in Joseph's story. Or a dream that recurs. If you have a recurring dream, you know that it's a prophetic nature. So in closing, we know that most dreams are nonsense because they're just the product of our daily thoughts. Except if interpreted. And if you're going to interpret it, make sure it's interpreted by a positive person. Even then, if you're worried, you can make the prayer for the dreams. Or you can make a fast. Remember, you can fast for the dreams as well. I'm just going to conclude with a story that happened to a friend of mine who lives in Parkland, Florida. Rabbi Mendy Gutnick is from Melbourne, Australia. He's a good friend of mine. He runs the Chabad of Parkland, Heron Bay, I think. When he got married, just 2 weeks before Pesach in the year 2000, 4 years before I got married, he married from Melbourne, Australia. His wedding was here in Boca to the daughter of Rabbi Biston. Anybody know Rabbi Biston? He's the regional director of the Chabad of South Palm Beach County. Rabbi Yossi Biston. At that wedding, Rabbi Biston, who's one of my own mentors, noticed that there was a person there from Flatbush, from New York, who was an old family friend, but they hadn't had any much contact for many years. So he was very surprised to see this man at the chuppah. He went over to him and he said, welcome, I'm so happy that you came to the wedding, but why did you trouble yourself to fly from New York to here? We haven't spoken in like 15 years. So the man said to him, it's a long story, I'll tell you later. Okay. The chuppah took place. The bride and groom were busy. Everybody was getting ready for the reception. Rabbi Biston goes over to this guy from Flatbush. He says, no, spare me no details. He says, the man tells him, you remember when you got married? He says, I was very friendly with your father, Rabbi Biston, who's an active Chabad rabbi today in Parkland. Your father and I were very good friends. Do you remember when you got married, you had no kids for a couple years? I then took it upon myself to go to the Rebbe. Now, I'm no Chabadnik, he says, but I took it upon myself to go to the Rebbe, to ask the Rebbe for a blessing for you and your wife to have children. I went to the Rebbe and I said, ask for a blessing for Yosef Yitzchak ben Sveta Gittel, and Bela Rachel bas Devora for children. And the Rebbe corrected me immediately and he says, no, it's Bela Rachel bas Devora Leah. The Rebbe noticed that I said the name of your mother-in-law incorrectly. And I said, okay, Rebbe, would you mind giving them a blessing? They should have children, my good friends' children. The Rebbe said, I already gave them a blessing. So I said to the Rebbe, said this man, that we don't need a blessing, we need a promise. So now this man is telling this to Rabbi Biston at his own daughter's wedding. He says, the Rebbe looked at me, smiled, and he said, I and you will dance at the wedding. That's what the Rebbe said to me. So I said to the Rebbe, I know the Rebbe doesn't normally attend weddings. The Rebbe said to me, but this wedding I will attend. The story happened in 1980, right? Okay. We lost contact. Within a year, you had a baby girl. Her name was, I forget his wife's name. Esti. Her name was Esti. So their girl was born within 1 year of this blessing. Okay. Esti Biston. Now we lost contact. Your father passed away. We lost contact. But you were kind enough to send me an invitation in the mail. I was on your list. 2 weeks ago, I received your invitation in the mail. See the invitation, and I remembered. Maybe I'm not sure if you remember the story, but he said, I don't think you remember the story. He said that about a week before the wedding, the Rebbe came to him in a dream with Rabbi Biston's father, his good friend, Rabbi Yudel Biston, came to him in a dream. And they both said to him, no, the baby was born. This is the blessing you asked for. You got to go to the wedding. You got to do your part. And in the dream, I said to the Rebbe, my financial situation is not exactly anything impressive. I can't afford it. That was the end of the dream. The next night, in the dream, the Rebbe comes to him alone. And the Rebbe says, no, you got to go to the Biston wedding. And he says again, Rebbe, but I don't have the money. So the Rebbe said to him, Hasidim don't worry about financials in these circumstances. So he said, but Rebbe, I'm not a Chassid. And the Rebbe said, yes, you are. In the dream, the Rebbe said to him, yes, you are. The third night, the Rebbe again came to him in a dream. And the Rebbe said, I've arranged for the funds to be available for you to go. That was 3 nights in a row. The next day, he goes to work and he looks a little preoccupied, perturbed. A colleague says to him, what's bothering you? He says, just financial. He says, you know what you need? You need a good vacation. You should get out of here for a little bit. Can't afford it. The guy puts his hand in his pocket, gives me $400. This story is being published. Gives him $400. And he says, go, even for one night, just get out of here. You'll clear your mind. Okay, it's $400. I guess it pays for a ticket in those days, I guess. He comes home and his wife, this guy, the guest, his wife says to him, Biston's getting married. He's marrying his daughter. You should call to wish them mazel tov. So he hears it all around, from the Rebbe in the dream, his old friend who's deceased, the guy, the colleague. Now his wife is telling him about the Biston wedding. He's like, okay, I'm done. And he decides, he buys himself a ticket and he goes for the day. When Rabbi Biston heard this story, Rabbi Biston is one of my mentors. He hears the story. Normally at a wedding, at a Chabad wedding, God willing, very soon you'll be at my daughter's wedding. We'll have many weddings here. You'll see how it works. But, at the wedding, you have the mothers, the fathers, they get drawn into the circle first and foremost. They get put on somebody's shoulders. instead of Rabbi Biston being put on the shoulders and dancing with his new son-in-law, Mendy Gutnick, he made sure to take this guy from Flatbush, and he danced, and he danced, and he danced with him for hours. And what everybody was a little perplexed, who the stranger was that the rabbi, the father-in-law, the father of the bride, was dancing with. Everybody was perplexed about this twosome dance. What they failed to realize is that this twosome was actually a threesome. I and you shall dance at that wedding. What that means, I'm not entirely clear. But friends, dreams are real. Not the dreams that are connected to our daily thoughts, but the dreams that are not connected to our daily thoughts are subject to our verbalization. You can choose not to talk about them. And maybe you'll want to do a prayer for a dream or a fast for a dream. And I can help you with that personally, privately. But if you do choose to verbalize them, be careful who you verbalize them to. Because the third level of a dream is the one that is unmistakable. It is clearly a 1/60th of prophecy, a divine messaging from up above, something for you to heed and to take advantage of. As we conclude tonight's class, I want to mention that next week, after today's talk about dreams, we'll be talking about the stars. Do the stars have any power over us? Is there such a thing as destiny and fate? Is everything predetermined? Or do we have the ability to intervene with our own trajectory? We'll be exploring next week astrology, free choice, and fate. As you leave today, please make sure to collect the special gift of the Shema. Ashley, you have the Shema to give to everybody to take with you. And if you haven't signed up, please do sign up for next week's class. So you'll have the textbook. Feel free to send me an email with any questions, comments, or critique to rabbi@jewishgardens.com. Thank you very, very much.